Live from Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray and this is From the South, the daily news brief from Telesur English. And we start this new edition right now. We begin in Peru, where 4 people have been detained after taking part in the Fujimori Never Again March, which included the participation of human rights activists, students, politicians, and victims' families. Our correspondent, Jaime Herrera, has the details in this report.
This peaceful march has ended with repressive police actions in Lima and other cities. For example, in Cusco, there are several students who have been detained and are being investigated by police, only because they were part of the demonstrations and had been protesting against Fujimori's pardon. In the capital, there are people who have been injured by rubber bullets and tear gas used by police during the march. Meanwhile, President Kuczynski has only used social media to send messages responding to these events without any official statement. According to social movement and union leaders, there will be future protests for January and February of 2018 all across the country, starting from the Cajamarca region and concluding in Lima. The demand of the march will be to call for the resignation of all political officials who were involved in multiple corruption cases.
So let's take a closer look at the march against Fujimori's pardon in the next report.
In Lima, the national strike against Fujimori's pardon was massive. Workers, students, and political movements participated in the protests to demand the government invalidate Fujimori's release.
The pardon of Fujimori is illegal. It's not a humanitarian measure. It's a political move of Kuczynski and his cabinet, and it represents an immoral transaction. They are just negotiating to save themselves.
Demonstrators were showing solidarity with the tens of thousands of victims of Fujimori's dictatorships that were killed, forcibly disappeared, or forcibly sterilized between 1990 and 2000. The general claim was that with the release of the dictator, these crimes will remain in impunity.
This guy killed, extorted, bought the private mass media. I can't believe they've pardoned him. This is so wrong.
After he killed so many people and he stole 600 million, how come they are pardoning him if he is a corrupt man and a murderer?
Let them repress us all they want. Let them close every public square. Whatever they do, we, the people, will not abandon our struggle.
The other demand of the demonstrators was the removal of President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski. Representatives from the Frente Amplio package were highlighting that the corruption scandal in which Kuczynski is involved should continue to be investigated.
This is not a humanitarian pardon. It's just a political pardon that was negotiated and thus not legally acceptable. This is why international human rights organizations are pointing at this as a violation of international treaties. And that's also a reason to declare the permanent moral inability of a president.
The protests also took place in at least 16 regions of the country and in different cities across the world, where people have promised to stand in resistance until Fujimori goes back to prison for the crimes against humanity that he was already condemned for.
The victims of forced mass sterilization during Fujimori's dictatorship in Peru are still struggling for justice and compensation 2 decades on. Between 1996 and 2000, during Fujimori's regime, at least 300,000 women and 20,000 men, mostly poor and indigenous, were forcefully sterilized. At least 18 women are known to have died because of complications arising from the procedure. Government health workers spent hours going from door to door to coax and bully women in a farming community in Peru's highlands to join so-called free medical treatments. The government had denied all wrongdoing throughout until the victims themselves organized, taking their protests to the press and prompting an investigation and backlash.
I have a wound, a very deep one in my heart, losing a child and at the same time feeling that someone made the decision for you to take away your right to be a mother, which is a natural right, that left a scar in me.
As we just said, over 300,000 women and 22,000 men are victims of this crime. To discuss this issue, we are joined now live by Alejandra Ballon. She's a Peruvian researcher who has written the book Memoirs of the Peruvian Case of Sterilization. Hi, Alejandra. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, thanks for the invitation.
So, can you briefly describe to our audience what exactly took place and how, what are the implications for the victims?
Well, this is a very terrible moment for Peruvians, and especially for victims of sterilization who have been struggling more than 20 years now. The case hasn't arrived at justice, but hasn't been possible in the case until. But reparation is possible because in Peru, reparation is another way separate justice. You cannot have, but still have access for reparation if you're willing to.
We're having slight technical difficulties with that interview, so we're going to try and come back to her later on in the newscast. Other news now. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights has called an extraordinary session to listen to the parties involved in the pardon granted to former Peruvian President Alberto Fujimori. Dr. Gloria Canao, director of one of the civilian organizations that represent the families of the victims of human rights crimes, said that the court has already declared that Fujimori's pardon doesn't have any fundamental legal standing, and they will demand an annulment. And former Peruvian presidential candidate Keiko Fujimori has appeared before prosecutors on December 28th to present testimony on her alleged ties to the Brazilian firm Odebrecht. Fujimori testified on the origin of funds used by her campaign in 2011 and 2016 based on an entry found on the cell phone of businessman Marcelo Odebrecht, mentioning Keiko's name. President Pedro Pablo Kaczynski also testified on December 28th on his alleged links to Odebrecht. Okay, so we are going to go back to that interview with Alejandra Ballon. Hello, Alejandra. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
We had technical difficulty during the first question, so I'm going to ask it again. Could you just explain to our audience what actually happened and what were the implications for the victims?
Well, in Peru, there was a national program for reproductive health family planning that went from 1996 to 2000, who had repercussions until 2001. And in this period, there were sterilized more than 300,000 people. There were a lot of them women from rural and or indigenous origins. We're talking about 272,028 women and only 22,000 men. And until now, we have more than 10,000 complaints in the registries of the state, even though there were a lot more of victims, but it's been very difficult for them because they live very far away and they are very poor. So for them, it's very difficult to access to justice. And now, with the liberation of Fujimori, it's been an awful moment for all the victims that have been fighting for justice over the 20 last years. And the case is not open yet. And reparation in Peru has a different way from justice. You cannot win a trial, but still have reparations from the state. So,
Alejandra?
Yes?
I wanted to ask you to expand on that. What actually does the Fujimori pardon mean for the victims? And is there any hope of reparations for them?
Well, new reparations has another way of justice. The trial is not open, even though it's been There are a lot of victims and complaints, but the state hasn't do the research and opened the trial yet. Anyway, the reparation process is another process. The state can reparate the victims if there is a political will to do it, and but there are very clear wills for that now.
And most of the victims of this forced sterilization, Alejandra, were persons from indigenous communities. Does this case have widespread concern in Greater Peru, or is it only concentrated on this particular ethnic group in the country?
Well, the National Program for Reproductive Health and Family Planning was a program made all around the 25 regions of Peru, in the coast, in the Andes, and in the Amazon. So the thing is that it was more concentrated in the population of rural or indigenous origin.
Okay.
And it's in these populations where being sterilized is against their culture.
Right, so it's a really serious human rights crime and a violation of their culture. Thank you so much, Alejandra. We appreciate you chatting to us. We've been talking to Alejandra Ballon. She's a researcher and the writer of one of the only books on the forced sterilization of Peruvian women during the dictatorship of the former president, Alberto Fujimori. Other news now, the Venezuelan Minister of Communication and Culture, Jorge Rodriguez, has said that in the following days, the first release of the Venezuelan cryptocurrency, El Petro, will be announced. Rodriguez explained that El Petro will be supported by the energy and mineral resources of Venezuela. He also said that with the creation of a cryptocurrency, the government has an instrument to avoid the attacks from the world financial system.
The government of President Nicolás Maduro proposed a cryptocurrency to stop all the aggressions to which Venezuela has been targeted by, using a financial blockade and economic war measures imposed by the government of Donald Trump.
The cryptocurrency was first announced on Sunday, December the 3rd. We now bring you this report from our Freddie Gillingham, which explains what Petro is about.
In a bold new move by the Venezuelan president, the new monetary system, which was announced on Sunday, will go by the name of Petro. A cryptocurrency which will be backed by Venezuela's vast oil, gold and mineral reserves. In the face of growing pressure on its foreign debt, Maduro hopes that this new measure will make it easier to make payments to its bondholders and creditors, without relying on financial intermediaries who work in dollars and are contained by recent financial sanctions.
I want to announce that Venezuela is creating a new cryptocurrency system stemming from oil reserves. Venezuela will create the Petromoneda, or simply Petro, to advance our monetary sovereignty, so that you may do any transaction in order to overcome the financial blockade. This will allow us to obtain new forms of international funds for the economic and social development of our nation. The release of this cryptocurrency is backed by Venezuelan riches based on gold, oil, natural gas, and diamonds.
Following Sunday's announcement, Telesur spoke to financial specialist Jean-Pierre Anaya to get a better idea of what the possible advantages are for using digital currency.
Yeah, at least the initiative in a very early stage. Yeah, it is a proposal. Yesterday, on Sunday, he called to a group of experts that will be the final proposition to create this Petro. But basically, it's an idea that it helps to overcome the problem that has been in our payment system, in our commercial exchange, that we are in the dependency of the banks. As in the previous example we call of, you need to vote to truth in a bank. Now we cannot trust anymore in the international banking system because they are forcing us to have a default. We are not paying the debt, not because we are not in the position to pay, not because we don't want to pay. We are not paying because the bank are stopping us the possibility to pay.
Although some critics are wary of the new move, calling it a leap into the unknown, the measure is one of few alternatives to deal with a debt that now hovers at around $100 billion.
The difference with the proposal of the Petro is that you are proposing from an important oil provider to create a currency used to the oil trading. Yeah, because now, even in OPEC, when was an organization created to dismiss the power of the United States in the oil trading, we still use US dollars that at the end of the day are controlled by US banks. Sure. So this is the fierce proposal to use an important commodity as the oil is, not using the traditional banking system, but uses a new technological solution to the problem of payments.
Economic sanctions from the US, Europe and Canada have been slapped on Venezuela, along with the slump in oil prices and the slowdown in oil production. These factors have hit the country hard. Its debt restructuring has been made difficult, if not impossible, by the sanctions. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
And we have more news in a minute, so stay with us. Welcome back. A Chilean Court of Appeal has overridden a legal decision regarding 11 Mapuche community members accused of murder. Our Francisca Castillo has more details in the next report.
Earlier today, the Temuco Court of Appeals resolved to override the annulment of the sentence of 11 Mapuche community members who were charged for the murder of the married couple Luch Singer McKay in 2013. On October 2017, the Temuco Court refused the Mapuche public defender's request to have the case thrown out. However, there will be another trial in 60 days where more evidence will be presented, which could possibly bring new charges for 10 of the community members and a 10-year prison sentence for Jose Peralino. The Araucanía public defenders said that the court decision was based on a loophole and the evidence showed was not analyzed properly by the judges. The indigenous leader, Francisca Dingonao, who is also part of the accused group, said that this is a part of the historic persecution of the Mapuche people. She also called on the public to be aware of the legal process and to raise their voices for justice.
Cuba's infant mortality in 2017 hit the lowest in the history of the socialist country at less than 5 deaths per 1,000 live births, according to the Ministry of Public Health. Cuba allows expectant mothers to stay in maternity homes where potential health risks to babies can be identified early on in the pregnancy. The report also highlighted the program for cancer control, which in the last 3 years has halted the increase of disease-related mortality. Dominica needs a new vision, so says Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit. So they looked at disaster recovery models from all over the world and settled on a template from Indonesia. He says the newly formed entity will be called the Climate Resilient Execution Agency.
Now, this agency is not there to replace the public service. It is there to complement the public service. It is there to work with you. But its success will rely heavily on the public service. And the intention there is, yes, we will have international experts in specific and targeted areas, but a number of public servants and, of course, citizens will be seconded to this agency. Bring to bear to the agency your own expertise, your own competencies, and also have some of the competencies transferred so you can come back to the public service and pass it on to the public servants.
Guatemala is commemorating the 25th anniversary of the peace accords that ended a 36-year-old-long civil war. Guatemala's civil war began in 1960, 6 years after the U.S.-backed military coup that ousted democratically elected military officer Jacobo Arbenz, who led a popular program of agrarian reform that affected landed elites and the infamous United Fruit Company. The war resulted in over 200,000 people being murdered or disappeared. Mayans, led by a priest, took part in a fire ceremony to mark the occasion at the archaeological site of Kiminal Juhau, where they prayed and sang for peace. The doctor strike in Bolivia continues amid a political standoff with the government. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, tells us more.
El gobierno del presidente Evo Morales y los gremios médicos.
It is still uncertain if dialogue between Evo Morales' government and the doctors' union to resolve the strike, that's been going for 40 days, will happen. The strike started on November 23rd because of an article in the new penal code that the doctors say criminalizes their profession. Several talks with the ministry have failed, so now the doctors want to talk to President Evo Morales. The government has complied, but with the condition that the strike must end, something that the doctors have not agreed to. The doctors want to join workers' union that has announced protests in January to demand not only that the article be made void, but also 700 older articles on the penal code that they say criminalizes protest. The government assures that the strike has caused 8,000 suspended surgeries, caused a backlog of 38,000 doctors' appointments, and 800,000 patients are without access to healthcare.
Teachers have taken to the streets of Argentina to protest against the new economic reform laws imposed by the government of Mauricio Macri. Our correspondent, Carolina Silvestre, has the details.
Buenos Aires is once again the main center of protests. This time, educational unions have marched outside the Ministry of Education against the closing down of 29 educational institutions. The city's local administration, along with Mauricio Macri's government, want to close down these institutions based on the recent economic reform law. As a result, teachers and administrative staff will lose their jobs. The government has proposed the project of unifying these facilities into one main university without guaranteeing any job positions. This initiative has been rejected by unions and social movements alike.
Argentine filmmaker known as the father of the new Latin American cinema, Fernando Birri, died on December 27th. He was 92. Birri's filmography was influenced by the social commitment through great aesthetic and stylistic variety, which included biographical documentaries. In 1986, he founded, along with Nobel Prize winner Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the International Film and Television School of San Antonio de los Baños in Cuba.
Muchas gracias, doña Zoraida. Pero la cosa es que andamos medio tecleando, ¿sabe?
Y mi hija, hoy te cobra la jubilación recién el 27.
And we'll be back very soon, so stay with us. Welcome back. 12 people have been killed in an attack on a church in Cairo. Among the dead were 3 policemen who were on duty at the church at the time. Several people are believed to be injured. The armed attacker tried to enter the Marmina church in Helwan city on the outskirts of Cairo. It is not clear how many attackers were involved, but the authorities claim that at least one person has been shot dead by security forces. Dozens of protesters have gathered outside of Nazareth to denounce the visit to the area by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he's to sign a development agreement. Protesters of mostly Palestinian descent marched through the village of En Mahil, behind a banner reading, "In Mahil, we don't respect racists." They also called for a boycott of the entire ceremony because of Netanyahu's personal and political anti-Arab stance. Iranian police have clashed with anti-government protesters in the western city of Kermanshah. The police fired water cannons at protesters who had gathered in the city's main square. The confrontation took place a day after hundreds marched against high prices and alleged corruption, as well as concern over the Islamic Republic's involvement in regional conflicts in Syria and Iraq. After his provocative decision to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, the U.S. president has identified the village he thinks Palestinians should claim as their capital. Our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harazin, explains.
For 3 weeks now, and Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip, in the West Bank, in Palestinian-occupied city, and also in diaspora, have been organizing rallies and protests against the U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Today, even the Palestinian people got more angry after hearing the news that the U.S. President Donald Trump has proposed on the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to take the Palestinian city of Abu Dis as a replacement of Jerusalem, to take the city as the capital of the Palestinian state. As soon as Palestinian people heard this news, they started heading to the borderlines, to the eastern and northern borderlines here in the Gaza Strip, and clashed face to face with the Israeli forces. The number of injuries only today was up to 80 people, 22 of them by live bullets. Hospitals here in the Gaza Strip has declared the status of emergency as they expecting more casualties to arrive to the hospitals. The number of Palestinians injured in the Gaza Strip over the past 3 weeks is up to 400, and also 6 people were killed during these clashes. The issue of Jerusalem, the third holiest site in Islam, is a very serious situation for the Palestinian people. It's a very serious cause for the Palestinian people and also for the Arab and Islamic world. So we do expect that the protests will continue, and more casualties will arrive to the hospitals, not only here in the Gaza Strip but also in the West Bank, as in several cities Palestinian youth are clashing with the Israeli forces.
We thank Noor Harazin for that report. 3 residents of a Berlin zoo had a minty fresh festive surprise this year in the form of a Christmas treat, or should I say Christmas tree. A rhino and 2 red pandas couldn't contain themselves when they saw the tasty Christmas tree. Although the greenery offers little in nutritional value, it gives the animals something to chew on to help clean their teeth and a novel Noel. And that brings a Christmassy end to our news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website, tellusyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Soini Gray. Have a good afternoon.
To enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real lives